This movie could have been so good. A prequel to the legendary original Lion King movie, where we see how Mufasa and Scar turn into each other's enemies and how Mufasa turns into the Lion King. There were particular scenes that hit emotionally, with compelling messages that ultimately didn't conclude very well and amazing characters that ended up being too rushed. The first 20 minutes or so were a little slow, but once the drama started with the villains, I was very invested with the story. I really enjoyed Mufasa grow as a character and expand upon his talent, but also develop leadership to eventually become king. Similarly to Hera from the new Lord of the Rings, I loved Mufasa's battle style, not because he's stronger than his enemies, but because he's smarter. I have to say though that he's a little bit overpowered. Like, he's genuinely a superhero as he's able to track particular animals kilometers away from him without any other lion having that ability. It got so bad that it felt like this ability of his was only made in order to move the plot forward, when they could have easily avoided this issue by utilizing the bird character who could warn the pack. Speaking of the bird, the best part of this movie is the journey to run away from the pack and find this hidden land, which supposedly is a magical place, which is a huge chunk of this movie. It starts off with Mufasa and his brother named Taka, which the trailers reveal turns into Scar. And we meet more characters throughout this journey that were very likable, such as Rafiki, who was much better in this movie than the original due to his increased screen time. You know who else is better in this movie? Sarabi, who also gets increased screen time, and so that trio of lines were incredibly enjoyable to watch. 2/3 into this film, I was starting to believe that this movie had a chance of being better than the original. But no, they kind of fucked up towards the end. Also, the film is narrated by the Hog and Meerkat, and they're funny in the original film, but holy shit do they suck in this movie. If they were entirely removed from the film, I genuinely think it would have made the film so much better and cut off about 15 minutes of unnecessary runtime. Every time they came on screen, they kind of just pissed me off, as it just kills the pacing and immersion every time. You know what else kills the pacing? The damn songs. These pointless, avoidable, shitty songs that don't add anything to the story, except like once. Musicals can sometimes work well, but man is that rare. And this is no exception. If you trim those out as well, then the story becomes like an hour and a half tops. So the audience has to sit there for an extra half an hour for no fucking reason. Also, yeah, this movie looks alright, I guess. There have been times where I couldn't tell the lines apart though, especially the female ones, so that confused me in certain scenes. But I just prefer the original animation style. It just adds a lot more personality that this film doesn't lack, but it definitely doesn't have as much personality as that first film. But yeah, we're now entering spoiler territory. Expect a decent movie with a disappointing end. So if you want to watch the movie, click off the video now. Now let me break it down to you as to how Scar got so upset at Mufasa that he ended up betraying him. He really likes Sarabi, so Mufasa helps him out by rizzing her up and then gives the credit to Scar. He even saves her at one point and tells her it was Scar. Then he spots Sarabi telling Mufasa that she knows it was him, and he can actively hear Mufasa denying it. However, he completely ignores that and gets so upset that genuinely 10 minutes later, he completely switches his personality and decides to not only get the villain to kill his brother, but also to lead them to the magical land. This is clearly not a natural transition and was clearly rushed. And the film kinda goes downhill from there. The final act was supposed to be this big climactic battle where Mufasa earns his right to be called Lion King. And on the surface it's a pretty decent climax, but due to Scar's unconvincing turning point, it just felt very lackluster and just simply underwritten. He eventually feels bad and decides to join his brother once again, but not because Mufasa helped him or because the antagonist was mean to him. He just watches the fight and then randomly decides that he made a mistake, which to me is such a cheap way of a hero trying to make up for their mistakes, and it happens quite a lot, which is annoying. As mentioned before, I like Mufasa's smart thinking, so his way of defeating the main villain was pretty cool. Now the reason why I say this movie had so much potential is because they had the right idea, especially with the messages they were trying to send. Rafiki is very wise and kind of like a sensei, and so he tells Mufasa that sometimes you just know when you should follow a feeling or not, just like when he does when finding a lost family. And they expanded on that once they got to the magical land, once Rafiki reveals that his new family was Mufasa. And it worked quite well, but it was kind of overshadowed by Scar's reveal. Also, the fight scenes were actually pretty intense. That scene with the elephants was pretty fun to watch, and I did like how the animal kingdom comes together towards the end and fights for their land. It's always fun watching rhinos obliterate things. So, this movie is just about as good as anime Lord of the Rings. So here's a 7 out of 10. And let's hope Sonic 3 is better. Alright, see ya!